So, have you been reflecting? I hope you have. Well, must be time for more things to reflect upon.
It's time for another show from Colin Jones, the Reasonable Adventurer. Time for you to take another step towards creating your own opportunities for satisfaction.
And it's a huge welcome to you to episode 80 of the Reasonable Adventurer. I hope you've been having a great week. I hope you have been taking advantage of the opportunity to reflect upon you and your ability to put yourself in the way of conversations and other people. It was interesting. I had some feedback from Lauren over in England, and really trying to sort of tease out some of the ideas from episode 79. And so that'll be what we're going to try and do today. And that was, Lauren said that, she thought that the points around being open-minded to people with opposing views would be really interesting to sort of try and tease that out. What can we learn from being around people who think about the world differently, and that's very much tied into that second attribute of the Reasonable Adventurer. So understanding the world view of other people, so that to the extent that it hopefully may change your own worldview. But I think also in relation to the fifth attribute of the Reasonable Adventurer, in terms of being able to develop that uncommon interest in the commonplace, that's because you actually have found another entry point into something that's right there where you are. And I think that can be your own thinking, but it can also be through understanding other people's thinking. And I can think of three very obvious, from my perspective, examples of where people with very different thinking processes to me have enabled me to really understand something about myself much better. And I think that Lauren's right. When we do tend to have this sort of gravitation towards like-minded people, because it's comfortable, isn't it? It's nice when we're surrounded by people who agree with us, who support us, who are rowing in the same direction, so to speak. And it makes life just that little bit more comfortable. And when we are surrounded by people, and we've got that tension in the air, and it may be aggressive, that's not what we really want. Most people they're not in it for that. They're not in life for a constant scrap with someone on a day-to-day basis. So, I think of somebody that I used to have conversations with, and it was really interesting because this person really liked the process of the conversation, but I found myself talking more and more, and I'd be thinking to myself, the person wants to talk, but I seem to be the one doing all the talking. And then I'd find myself in a situation where it would eventually dawn on me that, I may have mentioned something or said something, and that person would come back to me the next day with an answer or an opinion. And I'd think, wow, they've gone away and thought about something for a whole day before they really wanted to share their answer or their opinion. Whereas more often than not, I can find myself ready to give you the answer when you're only halfway through the question. And so that taught me a lot about myself, in that, one, I need to be able to develop that patience, to be able to at least listen to the whole question, but more importantly, to be able to comprehend that I have this tendency to want to jump into, and Roy Heath, the original creator of the Reasonable Adventurer concept, he had this as one of the learning types, and that was the sort of the jumper, the person who just had the energy, they just wanted to jump in there. And I can really associate some of my behaviours with that. And it was good that over time, interacting with this person, I was able to sort of learn a lot about myself in terms of, yes, I have this confidence, this inner confidence, which is good, but it's also dangerous because it means that some of the things that I'm saying are surely undercooked, right? They have to be, because I haven't actually taken the time to really think about my position or my views on this particular topic. It's really just this, what's on the surface, that's what you're going to get. Now, what's on the surface may actually be how I genuinely was feeling about something, but there's no guarantees in that regard. So there's one situation where someone, had this total opposite to me. They would have much preferred to have gone away and thought about something, and it suited them. And I've met a couple of people like this now over the years, and I now recognise that. And you're not always going to recognise it straight up. But when someone comes back to you and they want to continue a conversation from yesterday or the last time you saw them, and it's clear that they've been thinking about something that you may have already moved on from, that tells you that you're dealing with somebody who isn't locked into the same question-answer time frame that you're in. They're actually living in a delayed space because they want that reflection. They want to think through it. The questions may mean something to them. So that's one example of where I found myself. And it's not the opposing views, it's actually the opposing speed of thinking. And I think of one of my past colleagues, Jack English, who recruited me into academia. And Jack and I ran an entrepreneurship program, the one that started at the University of Tasmania for quite a few years. And it was really interesting because Jack saw something in me that I hadn't recognised in terms of being an educator, and he gave me lots of space. So Jack liked to do things Jack's way, and Jack had a particular way of doing things, and that's fine. And he was very successful at doing things his way. Unbeknownst to me, Jack already recognised in me that I did things almost totally opposite to him. And he could see that our program really needed the two of us. It needed someone who was going to cross the T's and dot the I's. That wasn't me, that was Jack. And it needed somebody that was going to sort of just bring sparks into the space and make things sort of just ignite along the way. And that would be me. And the more I worked with Jack, the more comfortable I became at being able to see that I couldn't do all the things that needed to be done. And Jack was clearly recognising or accepting that he couldn't actually carry the day all by himself either. And we then went on to work at separate universities. And, I missed Jack and his focus on the detail, his understanding of how to sort of negotiate with sort of certain levels of bureaucracy and the like. And I'm sure Jack missed me too. And so I think, you used to have that show, The Odd Couple. I think there are times when being with somebody who's the opposite of you is fantastic. And especially when what you're trying to achieve is bigger than you, And so rather than being with someone who thinks the same as you, who acts the same as you, there's clearly got to be benefits in being able to sort of work for a process where you are actually challenging yourself to be a little bit uncomfortable in terms of those checks and balances that exist in that relationship. And the last example relates to my late father. And, I've always had that capacity for excitement. I've got an idea. It's got to be the best idea of all time. And my dad was a very methodical person. So he wouldn't get overly excited about anything. He would just maybe be satisfied that he may have come up with a way of solving a problem that he was facing. And then he'd just go to work, checking, making sure that it actually all stacked up, that whatever it was he was thinking could be done. So I would find myself having this idea and saying, hey, what about this? And immediately, he would find himself zeroing in on all the obvious risks and problems with this idea, which I hadn't quite got to by this stage. And obviously I found this very disappointing. It was almost like he was always willing to rain on my parade. And it wasn't that he was willing to rain on my parade or was wanting to. He was obviously trying to protect me from making mistakes like any parent would. But he had an entirely different way of thinking about things. And he understood risk. And that was not something that I was naturally inclined to. Now we live in a world of lean methodologies and such approaches that, we're always thinking about risk, and we're actually trying to embrace it, and we're trying to bring it in, and we're trying to test and tease it out. But back then, we weren't, we were optimists, right? So you have an idea, it's like anything's possible with all these beautiful blue skies I'm being surrounded by. Oh no, not another person who sees grey skies. Now we're trying to find this balance between the two. We want our students to actually not purely see the blue. We want them to see the clouds in the sky and to actually try and make sense of things. So we don't want the pessimists and we don't want the optimists. We want the possibilists. And I think that's been a really big breakthrough certainly in my thinking. And so when you start to understand how people with opposing views and opposing ways of thinking to you can shift and shape the nature of your thinking, that's really cool. And when you can embrace that and say, you know what, I actually need that person to be with me because I can't work through these issues with my own impetuous approach, my own overconfidence. I need something else to be in that space. So, I'm not sure I'm fully answering Lauren's question here, but I think the key is to embrace it. And as that brings us back to you. In terms of your world, is that something that you naturally do? Do you find yourself looking for opportunities to be with people who have opposing thoughts, opposing ways of thinking? Or would you prefer the comfort of just being surrounded by people who are going to nod at you and say yes? Because ultimately, the more we embrace things like lean methodologies, what we're actually saying is we want to fail as quickly as we can. If our thinking isn't up to scratch, if it's off the mark, we want to work through that as quickly as we possibly can. So, where are you at with that? Are you comfortable with that process of being able to stay in the moment because you've actually put yourself into that space where you're testing yourself? And I think more than anything, it's not necessarily about testing yourself, it's being aware of yourself. Understanding your limitations in terms of the process of your thinking, accepting that you can't know everything and that other people can hold different views on things because they think differently. And when you can start to marry all that together, of course, you're in a situation where you've got a lot more going for you. So I'm going to leave you to reflect on that in terms of just extending through, that notion that we had in last week's episode, that propinquity of being able to sort of make sure you're putting yourself in the right spaces to meet different people, to allow those different types of events to happen. But once you're actually there, can you embrace those opposing views? Can you embrace and be aware of those different ways of thinking and feeling about these different situations? So, something for you to reflect on. I'll look forward to chatting next week. Cheerio.